Welcome to the Goody Show, this third episode for 2023. And today we have a very august and intelligent guest, Vivian Nguyen, who is the chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. Vivian has a great talent in terms of advocating for refugees. She came to Australia as a 12-year-old refugee herself, and she's a passionate advocate for general community engagement and cultural diversity. For over 25 years, Vivian has been a leader in corporate, community and government settings, applying her business knowledge and technical expertise to work with community organisations to advance their social objectives. She's held executive roles at Auschoice Financial Services, AMP Asset Management and ANZ Banking Group, where she led their global diversity strategy. She was also president of the Vietnamese community in the Australian Victorian chapter from 2016 to 2019. In 2002, Vivian was inducted into the Victorian Honour Roll for advocating for women's leadership and supporting young Vietnamese people. In 2003, she was awarded the Australian Centenary Medal, and in 2021 was awarded the Australian Order in the AM Division for advancing multicultural Victoria. So it's wonderful to have you with us, Vivian, just delightful. And that charming smile of yours I never tire of. So our first question is from Christina Chia, our co-host.
And thank you, Jim, and welcome, Viv. Welcome to the Goody Show.
Thank you.
Like, wow, what an incredible journey you've had. So it's always so good to see you again. Maybe just to kick off, tell us about your journey. I know as like a refugee coming to Australia and all your achievements now, I know many heard about your stories, but there are some who's not heard about your story. Maybe share with us about
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Christina. Gee, that long introduction made me worry.
It was pretty long,
I
wasn't
am
it?
supposed to be here to talk about mental health, not about as such. But I do appreciate the support from the communities in general, and of course the family as well. I want to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respect to their elders past and present, and acknowledge that this land was and will always be Aboriginal land. Yes, so Jim, I came to Australia in 1983 after having spent a year in the refugee camp in Malaysia. My dad was an interpreter for the American Army back during the Vietnam War. And when the war ended in 1975, he was caught and imprisoned for a number of years. And when he got out, he said to us that we had to leave because we wouldn't have a future here in Vietnam. I didn't know what a future meant, and I didn't really want to go because I was already in year 7 at the time. And I have heard of stories from neighbours and people having escaped and not being successful, and they had their heads shaved for the men and so on. And I said to Dad that I don't want to go because I don't want to be eaten up by sharks. But everyone else was, and so I came along as an 11-year-old obedient girl. And the trip took 5 nights and 4 days, and we landed in Malaysia and were there for a few months in the island, and then moved to the transit camp in KL, and then to Australia in December 1983 as a 12-year-old. It was, I have to say, growing up in Australia in the mid-80s was, I guess at that time, you learn to live with it. You cope with it because we didn't have the sort of policies or the sort of community awareness about different cultures and so on as we do now. And the Vietnamese people were the first wave after the abolition of the White Australia policy. So we were the first kind of cab off the rank, so to speak. And whether we experienced racism or racist behavior or, people calling me Ching Chong or, all those sorts of things, we were learned, or we were told, or we just learned to cope and to cop it on the chin and just get on with life.
So you experienced a lot of that
Oh,
initially.
You wouldn't say that we didn't, because we were the first lot that looked different from the broader European migration population into Australia. And I went to Brunswick High, which is a very culturally diverse, or very, there were lots and lots of people from the Greek community there. And, you know, we always constantly fought for the playground, whether it would be AFL or soccer. And all of those things. So, yeah, it wasn't the nicest sort of, there were times and it wasn't the nicest sort of thing to reflect on. But we had wonderful teachers, Jim and Christina. My English as second language teachers were just wonderful. They taught us literally everything about life. You know, they took us on excursion, told us that kookaburra is an Australian native bird. You know, those things that if you weren't told, you wouldn't know. So as much as there were challenges, and there were no doubt many, you know, things, the way you wear your clothes. You know, oh, did you buy this from the op shop? I had no idea what an op shop was. So yeah, you know, things like that. But at the same time, I also had many wonderful people who supported our integration journey enormously. One of our teachers became our sponsor to sponsor our parents over here, because I was the youngest in the family and I needed parental guidance. So yeah, there were good and there were not so good experiences growing up in Australia.
Do you think that has changed now? I mean, that's 40 years after your initial arrival. Have our attitudes in Australia perhaps changed towards refugees? Are we more welcoming now than perhaps what we were at that time?
I think we, as a society or as a population, are far more aware and far more informed of the flight of the refugees, whether they came from Afghanistan or Burma or Syria, and various waves that happened since then. So there is progress. Is it at the pace at which we would like to see as a democratic country? I think not. And particularly over the last decade or so, the way in which we as a nation, through leadership in Canberra, treated people from refugee and asylum seekers background was terrible. And in my view, I saw that as what I call a transactional, more so than being received as a permanent resident the day you arrive in Australia, which is how we were treated at the time. When we came to Australia, we were a permanent resident, and then you could apply for citizenship a couple of years later. Very different now, very different.
Harder.
Much harder. But I have hope in the Australian people that I think we can be compassionate and we can see the broader picture of humanity. And we are so culturally diverse now, we have to.
We are.
We have to. You know, we were all products of
Another place.
Another place, exactly. And if we don't have that compassion for another person from another place, what hope have we got?
Yeah, that's right. There is so much to be grateful for, to be honest, with everything that you've gone through as well. So let's shift gears a bit, talk about the immigration policies. I know Australia has got good intention in supporting refugees and migrants, right? So maybe share with us what are the effects of the current immigration policies and the impact it has to refugees. Has it deterred refugees or making it difficult for refugees to come to Australia?
In some way, I think it has. I also think that as a society, we are more conscious of the mental health and well-being impact on people of refugee backgrounds. And they come to this country with lots of skills, but also with that impact of the war trauma. And I think if we can recognize those challenges and support them to overcome them earlier, I think that would be far better for us as a society, but for that individual and their family. But also, if you look at it economically, I think it would be better to identify and support them address the issues there and then, as opposed to carrying it for a long period of time until such time that they feel they can address it. I know from my own Vietnamese community, many adults who came to Australia who really had to suppress their challenges to try and get on with life, getting a job, supporting their families here, but also their family members back in Vietnam in those days. They wouldn't have time to think about their mental health and well-being until now, when they're at the, the latter years of their life. These things are coming back, and it impacts them enormously. And it can affect the intergenerational challenges
Absolutely.
between the families. And we are not talking about mum and dad and the kids. We're talking about grandparents
Yes.
and children
That's
and
right.
parents and great-grandchildren for some as well. So those intergenerational challenges, I think, could be reduced or minimized if we were to acknowledge and support the refugees earlier than later. That I think that would be a much better way to look at to address the issue.
Do you think there's some reticence on the part of refugees to seek mental health assistance if they're suffering? I mean, many cultures find it difficult to
Absolutely.
acknowledge, and we have found particularly Asian cultures.
Yes. I agree that there is that. The word mental health in many languages doesn't exist. And when we think mental health, I know within my own community, when we think mental health, we think medication, we think hospitalization, we think institutionalization, and we think the person's a bit crazy in their head. And if that's the case, how can we trust the person with any role? So
it's an extreme
yes,
understanding of
mental
illness
health.
rather
Yes.
than health as such.
That's right. And there is a huge stigma, negative stigma associated with that. So nobody, especially for the men, you are the breadwinner, you are the, the center of the family, and if you break,
The family.
the family breaks. And also for many of them who were involved in the war, there is that face, there is that pride, there's lots that comes with it, Jim. So I think you are totally, absolutely right that there is that reticence. And we can't, or we shouldn't take the approach that build the services and they will come. We need to go to them to understand and ensure that mental health issue can be normalized, that it is just like you going to a GP, and that you can seek support, and there shouldn't be judgment about that particular requirement of your health.
Yeah,
And there is a lot.
You're so right. You're so right. Because you came as a refugee, I came as a migrant. And sometimes when we don't process our emotions, it's being suppressed. And as we get older, it surfaces, right?
Comes back,
So
yes.
what I've learned is you have to go through the emotion. You cannot go past and bypass it, right? So I hear you talk about, the help to sort of like get help before they've gone through the later years. So now, currently, with your role and the types of supports and services that we have, what else can we do to support? Are we doing enough? Can we do more? If yes, what else can we really do with immediacy to, help the refugees?
Yeah. There are a couple of aspects, if you like, Christina, if I could break it down. The first thing is forget the well-being, which is the new law, if you like, in Victoria, following the Royal Commission into Mental Health findings and report that was handed down a year or two ago. So if we look at just the mental health aspect, the way that you and I would think about it, that is the tertiary end, there is a lot of promotion that needs to be provided to the communities. There's a lot of awareness raising and the work around stigma and stigmatizing individuals for that, because sometimes the individual may not think that is mental health. He or she might think that is just something that they go through, or that there is that sense of self-denial.
Yes.
Combination of. So if you look at that aspect alone, there is the awareness, there is also the need for the system to change, to really understand and accommodate the different ways that people acknowledge, access and receive the mental health support. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done there, and obviously it didn't work, and that's why the Royal Commission into the Mental Health took place in Victoria. then we now find ourselves in the new landscape of the mental health system that needs to be redone or refixed.
Yes.
And then the new thing called well-being. That well-being, I think, is very new to the multicultural communities, and again, that also needs to be unpacked and to be explored, because it means different things to different people. And so there is a lot of work that I believe the government needs to do, but that the communities also need to understand as well. And our job at this point in the journey of the report, the Royal Commission report, is to really make sure that we have a seat at the table in advising the government departments on the strategic things that need to be done, things like workforce diversity, things like designing the services or redesigning the services, and things like informing the communities and inviting the communities and making it a bit easier for the communities to come to the table and unpack what mental health means for them and what well-being means for them, and what are some of the ways that we can take action. Because I think we can, something like this, and the way that the report has been handed down, we cannot rely on government to do it all. They won't be, and they will never have enough funding, in my view, to deliver on the mental health and well-being. And we have a lot to do, but that we need to empower the community, provide them with the knowledge, the information, and tools to be able to do that themselves.
Very much from a grassroots basis within the community itself, rather than from on high.
That's right. There are some things the government needs to do, but there are many things the communities can do, and it is about knowing about it, being informed about it, being provided with relevant and necessary tools, like the things that you are doing here in this organisation, so that there's greater understanding and greater normalising of what mental health and what well-being is, so that we can feel comfortable looking at it as something that we can do by going seeking help at a GP or someone like that, right through to talking about it out in the open.
Do you think the Royal Commission has provided some sort of template for improvement, or is it, in your difficult question to answer, I know, but do you think it will improve things for migrants and particularly refugees, or what are your hopes, or what are your fears?
I think the Mental Health Royal Commission report has provided some very specific recommendations, and also provided a specific focus on diverse communities. And when they think diverse, they think the LGBTIQ plus community, they think people with disability, and they think people from different cultures and backgrounds and faith settings and the like. So there is that specific reference to the multicultural and multi-faith communities. Unpacking that and trying to understand what that means is an important activity, and that unpacking requires both the government and the communities. I think there is a bit more work that needs to be going into the communities for them to be able to take part in this unpacking and thinking through what that means for them, and feeding that intel back to government to be able to design or redesign the system.
Oh, that's excellent. You know, what I was going to say is that years and years ago, when you talk about mental health, people don't want to know about it. They don't want to know you. And I'm so grateful now when we talk about mental health, people are keen to listen. And what I'm hearing from you now is actually positive news, that they're trying to unpack. They want to do better. They want to be better for the community. So on a personal note, right, we know you've done so much for the community. For our viewers here tonight or today, what's your professional and personal goals in the future? Any political aspiration, the types of impact that you want to do for the community?
If it specifically relates to mental health and well-being, I would certainly like to see more engagement with the multicultural communities in the thinking, the designing, the piloting or the testing of various models, and then the evaluating and ongoing monitoring of those service delivery models. I think it's important that we recognise that the multicultural community is now the majority of the population.
Yes.
But that we are very diverse. What
Yes.
you think of mental health and well-being,
Yes.
and the solutions for that may differ from mine. But that doesn't mean that we have to design 3 different service delivery models or 3 different multicultural communities. There are some things that have to be in common. Now, that is the work that I believe needs to be done, and needs to be done a lot more deeper and engagement level than what we do at the moment. And the structure that we have, and the same applies to the VMC as well, is a bit of a representative nature. And that representative nature needs to be challenged by the communities so that we can enable and ensure that every voice counts, particularly those voices with that experience, that lived experience, and that they are living through that at the moment. So that's my hope for the mental health and well-being side of things. Broader, in terms of my role as the chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, I think the racism and the anti-racism is a critical
Yes.
issue for the communities. And whether we want to acknowledge or not, the African community is currently bearing the brunt of
They
it.
are.
Yes.
In a much more direct manner. People like you and I experience in a more insidious
Yes.
manner. You can feel it, but you can't touch it. Whereas I
Exactly.
think for the African communities, they are feeling it much more directly
Wow.
than the way that you and I. So I would be called a ching chong in the 80s, but I don't get called a ching chong now.
Yes.
My barriers are far more structural, and it's not necessarily easy to be able to quantify and say, well, let's take somebody to court for that. It's much harder. Whereas if you get told straight in the face and all of that, it impacts you straight away. And so there are structural changes that needs to be done to support the broader African communities, because we have to progress as a society. If we experience that in our time, why would another person experience the same thing? We need to be able to say, well, yeah, they will experience something, but hopefully not as bad
Yep.
or not as traumatic as the way another group of migrants and refugees have gone through it. We need to make the way, what is the saying, the pathway that we develop would be better than the ones that we experienced. And that's what I'm hopeful
Yeah,
that
that's
we
the
could
argument.
do as a society and as the broader multicultural community.
Perhaps many Australians haven't quite made the leap in their own minds that this country is now a multicultural country. It is not, if you like, a colony of England, a Western Anglo-Saxon tribe, if you like, that we are a very diverse, my view, wonderfully diverse country in Asia, quite frankly. And perhaps, well, many people of my age, 70, haven't made that leap of understanding that mental transition to understand that we are a different country from what we were in the 50s, 60s and 70s when perhaps they were growing up.
Yeah, I heard the new governor of Victoria, who was sworn in or inaugurated yesterday, and she made a point that I thought resonates with me really well, in that there is room for the light to be shone upon us if we are more willing to listen to the new voices or to the voices of all Victorians. And I think that, to me, is really important, that we can listen, we can learn, and we can make the change. There's no point just listening, there's no point just learning, and there's no point learning and doing nothing with the lessons we've learned.
And there will be great changes. I mean, we know that next year we're expecting an increase in the number of refugees and migrants coming into this country. I believe it's 400,000?
I don't know, you've got me now, Jim. I don't know what the number is, but it would be a significant number.
I believe so, because the number of immigrants coming into the country during COVID was restricted,
Yes.
obviously,
Yes.
and I believe this is next year will be a make-up amount,
Yeah.
and so the backlog will be will be increasing next year. That's my understanding of it anyway. Sorry to have...
Not at all. Happy to consider, I don't know. Something.
But they will be
There are
facing
many
challenges, of course, with the rental situation being like it is. Probably, you know, I mean, there's always room for people with skills in this country, I believe, and our unemployment rate is quite low. But I think rental would be a great issue for newcomers to this country.
It already is a challenge for
Yes.
many of the existing families here in Victoria. So there is no doubt about that. And that, I think, is when there is a call out for action, it is a call out for action for all of us, not a certain group of Victorians. And I think that's also something that I also deeply reflect upon as well, that what can I do?
Yes.
And not all the time asking for things to happen, that there are many things that we too can do, like the work that this foundation does. And there are many sponsors, supporters, volunteers, people who provide their professional expertise as well. All of those things matter. And the more we can do that, the less reliant we can be on some structure.
Yeah, that's right.
And if we can empower the communities, Jim and Christina, to do that, that it is our collective responsibility, it is our collective right, and it is also our collective solution that we can provide to improve the society as well, whether it be in the mental health aspect or in the employment aspect, or just in the sheer compassion, sharing more of our compassion.
Yep.
It was actually something that drew me to this organisation when I first joined in the 1980s, and the motto of this organisation, the Mental Health Foundation at that time, was towards a more compassionate society.
Yes.
And really, I think that's an attitude of openness and welcoming that you're really talking about.
Yes.
And it's a change in attitude, it's a change in
is.
mindset, you know.
Totally.
Yes, I know. It's just amazing. And we're just so grateful. Like, Jim, would you agree that Viv is leading the game for us as well? Changing the game for us, leading the tribe as the chairperson of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. So thank you so much for your time today. We learn so much from each other, learn so much from you as well. Thank you for everything that you've done in shaping the way. It gives a lot of inspiration, and for those who's going to come after you, a lot of hope.
Thank you, Christina.
Well, I hope you're around for a long time, quite frankly, doing the work that you're doing, because I take my hat off to you because I'm a real fan of yours. I just think you're delightful. You're delightful to interview, I must say, also, Vivian.
Well, I think leadership isn't about one person. Leadership is about all of us.
True.
And we can all do something about that in our own way, in our own position, in our own capacity. And anyone holding a leadership position in a public setting, there is that extra responsibility. And I concede that it is an important function for me as the chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission to work harder to encourage the communities to be able to feel confident and able to step up or to do more, and to ask and to request and to take action.
Well, I think your leadership is wonderful, and you're certainly leading the way, and we need your inspiration, your humanity and intelligence, and don't be a stranger to us here at the Mental Health Foundation Australia.
No, I think you're doing an amazing job too, particularly when a lot of the work is dependent on the volunteering nature of everybody involved.
Yeah, and that's a good one to talk about volunteers and support from other people. So I want to talk about sponsorship today. And Jim, today's episode 3 of the Goody Show is proudly sponsored by North Shore Coaching College, a leading tuition college that serves the community for over 30 years. We have over 70 campuses that provides tuition to primary and secondary school students. And did you like what I wore today?
Oh, sensational. I think it would suit me
Thank
too.
you. Yeah, so this is proudly sponsored by State of Embrace. State of Embrace is a local small business operator and proudly Australian, and she has the products has done is basically supporting the environment, socially, and also ethical fashion. So thank you, Megs from State of Embrace, for this sponsorship of the outfit of episode 3 of the Goody Show. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Vivian. It's been delightful to have you here. Really appreciate you giving up your time, your very busy schedule. So we'll leave you now and
Thank
let you
you.
go. And just to inform our viewers that our next month session will be on surviving ICU, or intensive care units, with a smile, by Gary Kisoglu, who is a man that is a bit of a Lazarus. He's been on death's door 3 or 4 times, and he's managed to come back, but with a smile. The most remarkable man with a never say die attitude, I think, is probably the right way of putting it. Despite his ill health and his health problems, he's always such a positive person, such an inspiration. So I look forward to that interview, and I look forward to seeing you again next month.